some live interaction. Let's see if it is working. Over here, no that. Okay, got my chat box open. I think I got some live video feed action. Let's test the waters on that. Hi, everyone. If you can see and hear me, and this transmission is coming through to you wherever you are in the greater Virginia Tech tri-state area, please give me a shout out and tell me that you can both hear me and see me, although I guess seeing me does not necessarily have to happen. Maybe it would be better if you didn't see me. Just cover your computer monitor so you don't have to see my ugly face. And just listen to my melodious voice chime on about world events everywhere. So, is this stream here on the awesome Plaid Avenger Network working for you all? And it looks like we got some people now chiming in the chat room. Let's say hello to everybody, shall we? Smack1 says hello. Welcome back, Smack. Rover, R cover C gives me the Velociraptor. Always great to see the Velociraptor face. When I see the Velociraptor, I know R covers in the hizzle. I got a first-time chatter from Hokey Pokey 4475 saying hello. Hello, Hokey Pokey, and thanks for your first time chatting. Crew Cabo back in the hizzle saying hello. Hello, DCL Kid saying we can hear and see you. Merlin the Magician's back up in here saying hello. And JK White 40 saying heya. And Vikram Tiwari, a World Regional Geography alumni from a decade ago, is back up in the hizzle. Hello, Vikram. Welcome back. Hope you are doing well wherever you currently are in the world, and I hope you're meeting with much success. So, it looks like this is happening, and it is working. So, without any further ado, we can now officially launch. Welcome, everyone, to the online office hours for World Regional Geography, a.k.a. World Regions, here at Virginia Tech, home of the Fighting Hokies. How about that women's basketball team? And, of course, you're watching this on the Plaid Avenger Twitch channel, thanks to this awesome platform called Twitch that hosts the Plaid Avenger once a week, if not more frequently, for all our shenanigans talking about what's happening in the world. For those of you folks that are just randomly, accidentally tuning into this because you thought it was going to be some video game platform watching people kill each other with guns and swords and pixies, my name is John Boyer. I am the professor of World Regional Geography here at Virginia Tech, and we get together once a week to talk about all the news that's happening around the world that might be affecting you here in the United States or wherever you're at. And hopefully it's stuff that you are learning in this class that you can apply to your knowledge base for the rest of your life so that you can better understand what's happening in the world for the rest of your good days. We have XL Shopkeeper in here saying Guten Tag. All right, we have the German coalition has joined the chat room. Guten Tag to you, Shopkeeper. First time chatter from Distinct Vision. Ooh, that's a sexy screen name. Distinct Vision saying hello, friend. Well, hello, Distinct Vision. And that is an interesting, whacked out surfer punk from the 22nd century icon or emoji got up there. I like that one too. So first and foremost, as we start every office hour, what's going on, friends? What's happening with you personally? What's happening in the world? What are you following in the news? Do you have any questions about class? Anything about the course? Anything going okay? Everybody already got an A? Would you like more quizzes, more movies? What can I do for you for class? Or what else is happening in the world that you would like to chat about tonight for our whole 60 minutes together? And I see JK has already hit me up. And JK, did you email me as well today? Because a couple people already emailed me about that very event. The Hungarian Parliament approved Sweden's NATO membership. Yes, that was one of the things I wanted to talk about. And by the way, I do apologize for canceling out the last minute of office hours last Monday. I did not realize I double booked myself with another engagement. And then I never heard back from anybody to postpone or to remake up that office hour during the week because we all get so busy during the week. That's why Monday nights are kind of nice to do office hours because most of us are kind of chill. So I'm sorry I missed last week. And it was 2 weeks ago we last met, 2 Mondays ago. And that was at the point at which I was going to talk about former U.S. President Donald Trump attacking or blasting or saying something about NATO, degrading NATO, degrading its very existence. And that was the big story 2 weeks ago that I was going to chat about. But then you good people in the chat room asked me a bunch of other questions, so we never got to it. And I thought, after the podcast, I was like, or I should say the Twitch stream, it occurred to me, it's like, well, you guys haven't read about NATO yet. You haven't watched those videos. But that was 2 weeks ago. So let me get a confirmation from everybody currently in World Regions. You have now watched the entire video lecture series on all the international organizations, I think, but certainly you know a lot more about NATO. Can I get a NATO shout out from anybody who's in here right now to tell me that is the truth? Somebody preach me the truth about NATO. Have you learned all about NATO in this class? Back to the chat rooms. The JK says, no, I didn't email you, but I'm happy to hear other students have. So you'll be the third person that specifically requested we talk about Sweden joining NATO. Amrez up in the Hizzle saying, hello, everyone. Do we get points for missing office hours last week, Professor? Well, you can't get points for missing something. I mean, I personally failed you, but I can't give you points for my personal failure. Otherwise, you would already all have hundreds in this course. Katie, can you get me a polishing cloth? Actually, yeah, you have a bunch of polishing cloths right next. Oh, and I just realized my glasses are so dirty. I can't even see the screen because of the glare off of these suckers. Like, what have I been up to today? Oh yeah, I ripped out a part of a fireplace the other day, but I thought I've since cleaned my glasses since then. Let's see how that works. That's a little bit better. I can hold on to the cloth. Oh, cloth girl, can you come take the cloth back from me now? Thank you. By the way, would you all like to meet Katie? Too late. If anybody says they want to meet you, then you got to get back up here. All right, we'll pull her in at the end of the podcast. How about that? Keep saying podcast, Twitchcast, Twitch stream. Okay. Back to point. All right, let's get serious about this now.
Does this update international orgs?
Yeah, I'll get to that, Kruka, hang on. Let me get to everybody in order. Hokey Pokey shouts out NATO, so we have watched the NATO video at this point. First time chatter from the Slain Hero says, I got to admit, for once I actually enjoyed reading the textbook for a class and watching the videos. It's actually interesting stuff. Well, thank you, Slain Hero. I hope you're soon to be unslain and back amongst the living. First time chatter from Alistair. Alistair222, I am wondering, the International Orgs Update Flash Quiz, where is that located? I'm a little bit lost. And Krukabo follows up. I saw your announcement yesterday that you extended the International Orgs Update Flash Quiz until this coming Tuesday. Is that a new assignment? Because I can't see it and would like to get in on that. I can answer both of those questions because you were supposed to have a International Orgs 2021 update. When I sent out the email, I sent it before I realized, wait a minute, what year is this year? It's already 2024. Let me go look at what I did for the 2021 update. And when I looked at it yesterday, I was like, this is now really out of date. Even the update is now out of date. So I blocked it back out. So you can't take that quiz yet. Give me this week, although this is a busy week too, but I really want to do a brand new 2024 International Orgs update because there is a lot to update. And I will do that as a recorded lecture. And make it into a flash quiz worth even more points than the current old update was. How about them cookies? Is that cool with everybody? Truly, a lot has changed, like a lot in the last 3 years. But we're going to get a groundwork built for that 2024 International Organizations update right now. That's why I wanted to talk about this stuff tonight with you all, because, of course, if you're in the chat room right now and you're watching me live, that means you're the best students in the class. So you're going to ask the best questions and you're going to tell me stuff that you found outdated or defunct or made no sense in all of those international organizations lectures you already watched. And then I'm going to pull in some current events to talk about some things that need to be radically updated because there is a big big adjustment. I don't know if adjustment is the right word. A shift is underway in global attitudes towards international organizations. So much so that I may actually literally have to record all of those lectures all over again because things may change radically come November of 2024. And I think you all know what I'm talking about. If you don't, I'm referring to the possible re-election of former U.S. President Donald Trump. If you're a Trump fan, don't get your panties in a bunch. I'm not making fun of the man personally. However, if he gets reelected, it will be a titanic, earth-changing event for virtually all international organizations. That's not an exaggeration. It's not being reactionary. I'm not making fun of him. I'm just saying if this human becomes president again, he is almost promised to undo a lot of the international organizations that the United States is a part of, and that will have a domino effect on planet Earth. So I will, for you all this semester, I will be doing an update on international organizations right this week, but I'm going to have to hold my cards until after the next election because all of it's going to be changed when and if Donald J. Trump becomes the once and forever president again. And again, don't take this personally if you're Trump fans. This is policy. This is not personality. This is a policy shift. And this person has said, I'm going to shift the policy radically if I get back into office. So this is going to change a lot of things, whether you like the guy or not. It's not a personal comment on my part. It's what he wants to do. So having said that, let me get through the rest of your announcements, and then we'll get to some stories, and let me tell you about some of the impacts that Donald J. Trump is already having on the international organizational system and what future impacts he might have as well. So Cat 101 says, I emailed you about Sweden joining NATO. Boom, there it was. Cat's one of the ones that emailed me about it already. Rakanawad says, hello, everyone. Shopkeeper's got the cool kitty emoji up. Krukobo says, me too. Gotta love classes like that. Thank you, Krukobo. Junior San says, greetings from Brazil, Professor Boyer. Holy cow, Junior _San. What part of Brazil are you hailing from? That is awesome. We got an international crowd up in this hizzle tonight. Rakanawan says, me too. Distinct Vision says, number one with some crazy head bobbing thing that's making me slightly dizzy. And Junior San is in Sao Paulo, one of the most fabulous cities in the Americas. Welcome from Sao Paulo. So glad you're here. What happened yesterday in Sao Paulo, Junior San? I actually do not know. So what was the crazy day you had yesterday? And we will actually get to some current events here in a minute. But I got to hear what Junior San's up to now. Alistair says, follow up. I love this class and do want to get a good grade. How many expected points are there left in the semester? If I'm hovering around 320 due to personal family struggles, and I'm just wondering how many points will be available. You got another... Well, we're not halfway through the semester yet, I don't think. Or are we exactly half? However many we've had so far, you're going to have that many again. Because there will be quizzes. There will be lecture quizzes. There will be film quizzes. There will be flash quizzes every single week, all the way up to the very bitter end of the semester, which I think is May 3rd. So we're not even exactly halfway through the semester yet. So maybe go look at the point total for the class, which is probably around points offered. And maybe Katie can figure this out. Maybe we've already offered 1,000 points. That means there's probably another 1,000 to go. Something like that. So, Alistair, I'm sorry to hear about your family. I hope you're back on your feet. 320 is low. You do need to hustle up and do every single assignment you can from now on. But it is possible for you to catch up and still achieve an A. Junior San from Sao Paulo says a very big protest in favor of the former president Bolsonaro and against the recent anti-Semitism speeches of the current president. Oh my goodness, I've not heard of Lula making an anti-Semitism speech. And I'm not sure that The current president, Lula da Silva, would even say that he made an anti Semitic speech. But what Junior is referring to, Junior from Sao Paulo, Brazil, what he's referring to is that the current president of Brazil, Lula da Silva, has taken a very hard line against the actions of the Israeli government in the war in Gaza. He is very pro-Palestinian. Now, again, depends on your point of view and what get your blood pressure up on which side of the war in Gaza you are rooting for. But I wouldn't necessarily say that being pro-Palestinian equates to being anti-Semitic. Now, the Israeli government will say, yes, if you're not for our war, then you're anti-Jewish. There are reasons they're going to say that. I do give people the benefit of the doubt that folks can say, hey, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm not anti-Jewish, but I really wish you weren't killing so many Palestinians. So that is the debate that's raging around the world, by the way, not just in Israel, not just in the U.S., and not just Brazil. This is a worldwide thing that people are paying attention to, and people are very divided about Israel's tactics and the civilian body count in Gaza is what people on the pro-Palestinian side are very passionate about. Or even just pro-peace people. They don't have to be pro-Palestinian, but pro-peace people are very bothered by the very large civilian death toll that's accruing due to Israel's war in Gaza to try to defeat this small group of terrorists called Hamas. So I did not hear about anything specific that current Brazilian President Lula da Silva said that was anti-Semitic. However, he has recalled ambassadors to Israel, and he's been very vocal about how he thinks they should stop the war, and that perhaps even it's a war crime, and perhaps even it's a genocide. I don't know that for sure. I've not followed everything that Lula da Silva has said, but it wouldn't surprise me if he had said some of those things. He has been one of the few world leaders in the West, and I say the Western Hemisphere, that has been very, very vocal in opposition to the war in Gaza. A lot of other European and Western Hemisphere leaders aren't happy about it. They're not huge supporters of it, but they've not been as vocal as Lula da Silva has. So thanks for the update from Sao Paulo, Junior. And Junior's follow-up is people got angry because he compared the Israel war with the Holocaust. Yes, I did remember hearing that reference. Yeah, and again, does that suggest that he hates Jewish people? No, he's actually making that comment to be very poignant, very pointed, as saying, hey, you guys are doing the same thing that happened to you guys during the Holocaust. It's a bit harsh, and the Israeli government is none too pleased about it, and it is going to cause some rifts within the alliance network that we call kind of the Western world. Lula da Silva does stand alone right now in being that critical of Israel, although many other leaders might be thinking it, if that makes any sense. Okay, let me go up to, here we go. JK says, I heard DeLula kind of put his foot as far into his mouth as he could. Okay, so I guess I need to read up on this. I didn't read the exact comments, but I'm getting the spirit of what happened here now. Now I understand why there was a counter protest or a protest against whatever he said, and there would have been a pro-Bolsonaro protest simultaneously, because Brazil, for those of you who are not living in Brazil like Junior and not following the current events of Brazil, Brazil is almost politically identical to the United States right now. What I mean by that is there's kind of the left-leaning party and the right-leaning party, and they hate each other, and they're bitterly divided in society, just like America. And the previous president, Bolsonaro, was more of the right-wing variety, much more like Donald Trump in America. And when he lost that election, much like Donald Trump in America, his core has gotten furious and want to see him come back. And so in both countries, both the U.S. and Brazil, severely politically divided society between a left and a right, sometimes with people on the very extremes of those lefts and rights. And in both countries, the more right, center right or right wing guy had the presidency the last term, and in both countries, the more left liberal people won the current elections. So that's why Lula da Silva's in charge, much like Joe Biden's in charge in America from the liberal left side of things. Very polarized societies, both Brazil and the United States. Okay, back to the chat room. First time chatter from Mac Attack, who says, good evening. I was wondering if you had thoughts about Macron's statement tonight about not ruling out Western troop deployment in Ukraine. Yeah, that came across my eyeballs too, Mac Attack. And thank you for your first time chat, Mac Attack. And for those of you that did not see that story, a French president, Macron, suggested in a news conference earlier today, I guess a reporter asked him, is it feasible that there might ever be international troops to go to the assistance of Ukraine in the Ukraine war? And he said, sure, I'm not ruling that out. And it's like, whoa, really? Oh, okay. That actually is kind of a big deal too. The pro-Ukrainian supporters worldwide are all about giving them money. Well, not the U.S. Congress so much anymore. All about giving the Ukrainian army money, weapons, food, medical stuff. Countries never mind giving stuff if they want to support an ally. In today's world, nobody wants to give troops, though. Giving humans to go help fight a war is a completely different political football. And what I mean by that is the French people may support Ukraine. Probably many of them do, if not most of them. Support Ukraine in its war against Russia. And many of those same French people would probably say, yeah, sure. I mean, it costs a lot of tax dollars, but we should send them money and guns and medical supplies. And, some people in France may bicker about, well, we're sending too much or we're sending too little, but we'll send stuff. No one's really too upset about sending stuff to Ukraine. But you start sending French citizens with guns to help the Ukraine physically, one of them is eventually going to die. And now you've got a whole different ball game that you're playing in terms of political risks to the leader that would send French troops, and some of them will die. But it also ups the ante significantly for Russia and a possible World War III scenario. Because it's one thing for Russia to be conducting this attack and killing as many Ukrainians as they can. It's another thing if other countries get involved. Let's just go worst case scenario on this. If the U.S. sends actual troops into Ukraine, and then Russia kills or blows up a battalion of U.S. Army Rangers, is that an act of war against the United States? This might change that war. Now you're talking about a NATO member whose troops were attacked or killed by a foreign entity. Could the United States call up Articles 5 of NATO? And now we're in nuclear war. Now we're at DEFCON 1 nuclear war. So sending troops from foreign states into an active war is a very significant deal, and it's a game changer for the very nature of a local war that turns into a global war almost overnight. So I was really surprised by Macron's comments myself. I'm like, did he really say that? Dude, France, you should stick to your guns of just surrendering when asked to get involved in a war, not volunteering your own army. That was quite surprising. I haven't processed all that yet, Mac Attack. I'm not sure Macron has either, and the French people certainly haven't either. So that's what happened. There's no real other assessment to talk about until a few more days goes by and we see how serious he was and if it comes back up again. Let's see. Back to OMRCZ says, I would agree with that statement. I personally disagree with the Israeli government, but have nothing but love for the Jewish people. I think that's a lot of people in the world would say right now. And so everybody has to walk a fine line of, I would like peace and I would like not so many civilians to be being killed, but that doesn't make me anti-Jewish, does it? So that's where everybody's at right now. First time chatter from J101921 saying, "Hey there, Professor Boyer. How has everyone been?" Well, thanks for your first time chatter, Jay. We've all been great. We're glad you're here with us. Let's see. It says, people are being too radical about everything nowadays. Just because you disagree with Biden doesn't make you a Trump lover. There's just so much division for everything. Exactly. Everybody take a breath, everybody. Take a breath. You should be dedicated in your personal beliefs and principles of what you believe to be morally and ethically the correct thing to do in your life. And you should stick to your guns when you're passionate about something. But that doesn't mean you need to destroy everybody who doesn't think like you. That's kind of the problem in the modern age is everyone now, and social media has not played a particularly great part of this. But because of social media and this kind of me-centered world we live in now, a lot of folks, if not everyone, now thinks that anything that pops into their head personally must be a fact. And it's like, whoa. Hey, everybody. And, you guys are students, so hopefully you don't think like that yet. That's why you're at university. You're here to absorb more facts and get different perspectives and opinions and learn stuff and mull things over and wrestle with complex issues like the Israeli war in Gaza. However, whatever pops in your head is not necessarily a universal truth that you then will fight to the death for. I mean, almost everything that pops into your head is an opinion based on, hopefully, facts that you've accrued in life. But as we all well know, not all the facts that you accrue are actual facts either. There's a hell of a lot of propaganda out there, and now we're back to why social media sucks. So there's so much propaganda and stuff out there that people are biting off and chewing and digesting lots of things that aren't particularly true, and then coming up with an amalgamation of these mistruths, and they have an opinion that pops up in their head, and they think that opinion is fact, and that's very problematic in today's world. I will sit here and talk to you about a variety of things, a plethora, if you like, of things happening in the world. And I try as best I can to sort out the facts from the fiction, and I will present you with as much facts as I can. But just because I think something in my head doesn't make it true for everyone. I recognize my limitations, as you all should, of, well, this is my assessment of the situation in Russia right now, but I am not Russian. I do not live in Russia. I don't want to live in Russia either, by the way, but I'm not Chinese. I can't possibly fathom everything that's going through the average Chinese citizen's mind about what they think about their government or what they think about the war in Ukraine or what they think about right and wrong on planet Earth. We all can only work with what we got. The best you can do is try to make sure you cultivate as many factual sources as possible, as many different news sources, literary sources, or otherwise that have a good track record, let's say, that have been around for a while, that aren't particularly pushing, or at least they try not to push, a particular agenda. News sources that are balanced, or as balanced as they can be. At least present multiple sides of arguments. These are the things that we want to accrue in our life to try to better understand the world. Because otherwise, if you're only going to go and digest news of things you already believe, then you're not really learning anything. And you're not really getting the full picture of what's going on. In other words, you're just going to reinforce your already opinions in your head that you keep reinforcing with this same thing you already believe. You just read it in multiple places and you're like, well, I read my opinion in 10 places, so therefore my opinion is fact. No, that's just 10 opinions that agree with your opinion. That does not necessarily make it fact. So always remember, you can only understand the world through your own eyes. Try to empathize, not sympathize. Empathize with other viewpoints. Empathize, that is to understand where people are coming from even when you don't agree with them. I always empathize with people. I'll talk to people who I would totally disagree with. I mean, to be, more topical, there are some people that are huge huge Trump fans that he's like a messiah to some people. He's not a messiah to me. I don't think he's a messiah, but I don't think he's God on earth. Some people do. I don't dismiss them out of hand. In fact, I like engaging people. I'm like, why do you think that? I'm very curious. I want to know. Curious minds want to know. So always try to keep curious in life and get multiple news sources that have multiple different takes on things or opinions about things to be the best informed person that you can be. Sorry to go off on that tangent. We're not even going to get any damn current events tonight. Okay. Let's see. Back to JK. He says, I feel conflicted about Israel as well. On the one hand, it sounds like what they're doing is super heavy-handed, but I would bet my bottom dollar that the U.S. military would not accept any agreement that didn't involve returning all U.S. citizens involved too. Yeah, no, the U.S. would probably be doing much the same thing, and one could probably point out instances where the U.S. has already done similar things. It's just hard. In today's world, these operations are so much more polarizing because we can watch them happen in real time. You have to remember, you all are young. I'm old. And the thing about being young, you were all born this century or shortly before. 40 years ago, if this war was happening in Gaza, we would know virtually nothing. I mean, you'd be getting reports on it saying, hey, some people died, but you wouldn't have nowhere near the understanding of the scale of the war, of the death toll, literally minute to minute, of live imagery coming out. I mean, that's just something the world, for all of human history, has never worked like that until now. And so one of the other reasons why the world is so much more polarized right now is because we can see all these things in real time, and some of these things are horrific, and they stir real enmity and passion and anger and fury in people when you can see it in front of you. I mean, when you see dead babies, that usually gets people fired up. That pulls on heartstrings, whether you like babies or not. You're like, oh, that's scary. And I am now passionate one way or the other about some violence that I'm seeing. And again, it's part of the technology and social media of our day. Basically, we're the same human species we were about 100,000 to 200,000 years ago. We can only process information about the same as we used to. I know everybody thinks we're much more special than cavemen, but you're not. The brain can only do so much. We can only handle so much. And in today's world, our species is being tested to a break point of how much can you handle and keep functioning. My fear in today's world is we're so over inundated with so much information, so much violence, so much real-time footage of things, bad and good, but it gets so overwhelming. My fear for the future of our species is that everybody just kind of stops giving a shit about anything, because it's kind of human nature to be self-preserving. I should say human nature. It's all creatures are self-preserving. And when you start getting overwhelmed so much that your brain starts to shut down because of the overstimulation of news and violence and crazy stuff, the human brain will just start to shut off, be like, I'm done, I don't care. Self-preservation, I can't watch this stuff anymore, I'm out. And you're already seeing that. You can actually watch this happen in real time now in just weeks and months. When we see current events now, like the war in Ukraine, I read a story earlier today about, people in the United States and Europe are getting tired of the Ukraine war, which is why they are tuning it off and they don't want to support it anymore. You're like, yep, that only took 2 years. Oh, people, and I saw another story. People in the U.S. or wherever it was took a survey, and lots of people are tired of hearing about the Gaza tragedy. And it's like, yeah, that's only been a few months. I mean, when you're inundated with things, the brain tends to burn it out and just be like, I just can't care anymore. So I don't know that there's any solution to that besides just trying to stay grounded. And again, when you're going to watch news, you shouldn't watch news every day, by the way. Don't watch it every second. It's too much. What are you going to do with all that information? It's changing too quickly. But when you want to understand a situation, take a day here and a day there and read multiple things in multiple places. But don't get too bogged down. Don't try to read news for 12 hours straight. it gets just to be a little too daunting, and there is a high burnout factor that I think is only going to increase as the years go by and technology becomes even more pervasive into our daily lives. And also get outside as often as you can and just don't do anything. Just disconnect as much as you can. That's easy. I know what you're thinking. It's easy for an old fart like me to say, but I'm really happy. And I try to tell the other folks of like, what's the secret to your happiness? Lead a good life. Be good to people. Get outside more. You don't have to be glued to second updates about international news or your TikTok page. Who the hell cares about that stuff at the end of the day? But that's just me, the old fart talking. Okay, let me get back to something that we were going to talk about today. Merlin the Magician says, what's your favorite topic going on right now in today's world? I'll get to that in a second. Distinct Vision says, is it fair to not pick a side on this war because of their history? What do you think? Yes, Distinct Vision, it is very hard to pick a side or not pick a side in the Israeli situation. There is a lot going on, and you can easily, I could easily make the case to defend all parties involved in the whole Israeli-Palestinian situation, which has been going on for 80 years now. So I can make the argument of why this group should elicit my sympathy, and I can make a different argument of why that group should elicit my sympathy. It's really easy to do because at the end of the day, I kind of feel sorry for everybody involved. Junior Sand says, very precise comparison between Brazil and U.S. Indeed true. Well, thank you, Junior. Mac Attack says, of course. Hokey Pokey says, confirmation bias is a bit of a plague on people. Yes. And wine, secret of happiness. Thank you, OMREZ. But now we're almost out of time again, so let me at least get to the stories I was going to reference for what I'm going to try to talk about. I'll get your feedback and get your questions of what you don't understand about what's happening with international organizations in the world right now. And let's see if this will do it. This will do it. Okay. So one of the first things, now that you've learned all about NATO, is that it is changing rapidly. So I recorded that NATO lecture probably a decade ago, and I thought, well, I'll never have to change this. It's NATO's NATO. It's not really going anywhere. And I was wrong. It finally caught up with me that NATO is changing fast. And several of you already hit up this story right here of Sweden clears final hurdle in bid to join NATO after Hungary approves accession. All right. But we should go back in time just a couple weeks. So what I was going to talk about last week was this debacle. And I don't even particularly care if it comes off as being, politically motivated or politically jaded in U.S. politics. As I try to mention often, I don't particularly follow or care about U.S. politics. I probably will vote in the next election, but then again, I might not. I only bring up U.S. issues and or Donald Trump or Joe Biden as it pertains to world events and understanding the wider world. And so what Donald Trump did a couple weeks ago, and he probably really didn't even understand what the hell he was saying. He was just bragging about whatever popped into his head at the time, which is the basis for most of his speeches from what I've seen. Trump had a rant at a public speech saying, yeah, NATO sucks and they're not paying their fair share, and the U.S. is carrying the load, and the U.S. doesn't need anybody. He didn't say that, but this is what he means. The U.S. doesn't need anybody. U.S. first, or America first. America first. America doesn't even need any friends. That's kind of what I'm starting to hear when Donald Trump talks about these issues, is we don't even need allies or friends. Seems bizarre for a U.S. president to say that. Seems bizarre for anybody to say that. It seems bizarre that any human in any country on planet Earth would say, I don't think our country should have any allies or friends. You're like, all right, well, that's a new way to look at international politics that has never happened in human history. I mean, there are isolationists. And then they're really isolationist. And I suppose somewhere back in the 100 Years' War or something in continental Europe that somebody had the brilliant idea of, we should forego all alliances and never have any friends. I've just never heard of it being done in history yet. Hell, you could go back 50,000 years and Tribe A probably teamed up with Tribe B to beat the shit out of Tribe C at some point. Alliances are what human societies do to ward off troubles or take over somebody more powerful. Or there's pros and cons to alliances, but they've kind of always been there and they're kind of a big deal. So it's particularly odd that a former U.S. and possible future U.S. president continues to suggest that he doesn't really care about any of his friends. It's interesting. And it's even more interesting to me, who teaches this class called World Regions, that Donald Trump somehow has picked the world's most successful military alliance in human history to poke fun at and say he wants to dismantle it and it sucks. It is with no reservations. You guys saw me lecture about this already. NATO is the most successful military alliance of all time. Not of this time, of all time. No one, not one single country on planet Earth would ever attack a NATO country. Why? Because Article 5. You all know this now. The world has not seen a world war since World War II because of NATO. Now, again, you could be a NATO hater, and there are lots of NATO haters out there, but don't be so foolish as to suggest that NATO has not been a critical component of why there's not been another global war. You would just come off as foolish if you say that. NATO, no, World War III hasn't happened because not NATO, but because Russia's good. You know, I don't even know what argument you make with why there has not been more global conflict. And it is interesting that global conflict is rising at the very second that former President Donald Trump keeps suggesting that he doesn't support this huge military alliance as much as all of his predecessors. It's interesting to me that Russia attacks Ukraine and you starting to see alliances shift even within Europe, and there's chaos starting to foment in different parts of Africa at a precise point that Donald Trump and others, by the way, and I'm going to stop picking on Trump, Bolsonaro of Brazil, he was the same way. A lot of more right-wing leaders in Europe, namely Hungary and Austria, are also starting to question, well, should we be part of NATO, or should we even be part of the European Union? You did have Great Britain, who pulled out of the European Union, what has it been now, like 6 years ago, 7 years ago? So one of the reasons why I need to redo, and by the way, please give me your feedback or opinions on this. One of the reasons why I need to redo the entire international organization section of lectures, or at least with an update, is because even 2 years ago, but certainly even 5 years ago, I would have never envisioned, and I don't think I'm alone, hardly anyone who watches this stuff would have envisioned that the power of international organizations suddenly would be going down. These are entities, as you well know from lecture now, that are alliances between countries. Some of them are economic alliances, some of them are military alliances, some of them are cultural alliances. And there is more power in numbers. It's not really a debatable thing. If there were only 100 countries in the world and 99 of them were on one military team, well, the 100th one's not going to do squat. I mean, there is power in numbers in single voice. And so I am quite shocked, as many are, that international organizations are on much shakier ground than they have ever been for 100 years. And I will even say 100 because a lot of these things only came into existence after World War II. Almost all the ones we're talking about are post-World War II. But they came about precisely because of the chaos of the entire world between World War I and World War II was so chaotic, so many countries said, I would rather be part of a team that helps quell the chaos. And so the chaos did get quelled. And there hasn't been a lot of global conflict, and there's certainly not been a global war since 1945. And world economies have bound themselves together in lots of different ways in international organizations that has wildly increased trade and the movement of goods and services, and sometimes even people within blocks of international organizations like the EU that has free movement of people. Latin America was moving towards, Mercosur was moving towards free movement of people between borders. Everything was moving in that direction, but things are starting to move. The pendulum seems to be swinging back. And I really shudder to use that analogy, pendulum swinging, because if you follow my analogy, with a lot of things in life, like, there's a right-wing person in power, and they get so bad that the left-wing person comes in power, and then they get corrupt, and the right-wing person comes back into power. So politics is very pendulum, all right, arced, and economics are the same way. There's a big inflation or there's a depression now, everything sucks in, and then it kind of gets better and floats back this way. And then there's excesses of capitalism and people get too greedy and then things swing back this way. So the same analogy I'm applying to international organizations worries me a little bit, because the pendulum swing could get way, way, way bad if it keeps going on its current trajectory. So follow me here. 1945, World War II. For the whole first part of the 20th century is chaos and bloodshed everywhere. And so everything gets so chaotic, it gets pushed all the way up into the horrific circumstances of World War II, the Holocaust, a civil war in China. There's death and destruction everywhere in the 1940s. And it gets so bad that when things get settled, we're like, okay, now the pendulum's going to start swinging back towards anti-chaos and collective action. And so we're going to build all these organizations. We're going to build the United Nations, and we're going to build NATO and the Warsaw Pact and the European Union and all of these things. And the world's getting better, and the world's getting more stable and more stable and more stable. And now it looks like we're moving back in the opposite direction. Now do you see why I'm slightly worried about the pendulum shifting the opposite way? And for you young folks, it's the first time this has happened since World War II. It literally is the first time the pendulum is moving in the other direction for 75 years. So it's almost 80 years of one directional movement in the world, in these international organizations, and stability. Now, don't get me wrong, by the way. Of course, there's death and destruction everywhere in the world. There's civil wars all over the place, and there's famine all over the place. But I'm saying, looking at the entire globe, comparing it to, say, 1900 to 1945, things have been way better from 1945 to 2024. And the movement back is like, oh, okay, so if we're going to move back in the other direction, away from international cooperation, away from international organizations, which bind people together either through trade pacts or military alliances, how far will that go, and how much more chaotic will the world get because of it? And again, there is a lot of conflict that's now starting to pop up all over the place. And again, I'm just thinking the pendulum is moving back the other. So I can't remember which way I was giving it to you guys. The pendulum is moving back from the stability swing and going back the other direction. It's like, well, we could be in for a lot more chaos ahead. And this gets me back to finish off, before I even really started, about all these news stories I want to talk about. This gets back to the Trump rant of why it was such a big deal. Is NATO was the most successful military alliance ever, and the idea that you would throw away all of your alliances and friends, your friends, the people who have fought wars with you, and you're like, no, I don't need them. You're like, wow. This is what's got a lot of folks really worried about the second Trump administration, that seems to almost relish this go it alone attitude, America first and America by itself. This is new. We haven't seen anything like this since gosh, I guess pre-World War One. It's a tough one to call historically. I don't know. I've never seen the United States in a period of isolationism that looks like what Trump and the current Republican Party want to move it to. Again, not a judgment call. I don't. Maybe it'd be great. Maybe it'll be fantastic. But the U.S. is a world leader, is the world leader of trying to bind countries together, either through international organizations like the United Nations or their subset of their Team West, through international organizations like NATO. So going it alone, the U.S. becoming an isolationist state, it really sows the seeds of chaos in lots of other places. And again, some anti-U.S. people are like, good, the U.S. should stop doing everything. So Donald Trump and this isolationist stance might have a lot of followers on planet Earth who aren't even Americans. There's a lot of people who hate America, and they're like, good, the U.S. should get out of here. The U.S. should pull back all its military forces. The U.S. should have nothing to do with world politics. The U.S. should influence no one. They're evil. They should go away. And you're like, okay, again, I empathize. I can understand that opinion. But my question back to these folks and to the Donald Trump followers is, what does the world look like when the U.S. is not in charge or not leading in any way, shape, or form? No, we don't have to pick on the U.S. What does the world look like when you get rid of all these organizations that bind countries together under common cause? You're talking about a world that's every man or woman or country for themselves. Everyone for themselves. And if you want to see what that looks like, go read a book on World War I and World War II. It's not even... It's not really up for debate. This is the way the world has worked for most of human history, is every country for himself and damn everyone else. And you're like, sure, we can give that a go again. It's worked so well in the past. And now, unlike the past, now we have nuclear weapons. And now we have cyber crimes and hacking and networks and hacks that can shut down grids and shut down transportation networks and communication networks and launch nuclear weapons. That's the world in which we now live, and you want that world to be every man for himself. Well, honestly, folks, this is my John Boyer opinion. I don't want that world. I'm not particularly interested in seeing how that world plays out, because it ain't going to be none too good. But maybe I'm just wildly optimistic about the power of international organizations and cooperation on planet Earth. Now, I know I'm almost out of time. Strangely enough, once again, I'm almost out of time. So I did want to point out that that was the news story 2 weeks ago. And what was Trump really ranting about? Trump was ranting about the U.S. doesn't need these folks. I will say this as nicely as I can. Donald Trump is good at many things. A kind of deeper understanding about international politics and international organizations is perhaps not his strong suit. And so when he sees NATO, he's like, all of these weak countries are just huddling under the U.S. umbrella for protection, and they're not paying enough money. They're not building up their defense budgets enough. Every country in NATO is supposed to be spending 2% of its GDP on its own military so that they are part of the general NATO fighting force. He had a point in saying that. A lot of speculators and political analysts and politicians around the world said he's right. You know, maybe Belgium is not paying enough. Maybe Canada's not paying enough. Why does the U.S. have to spend 2% of its budget of GDP, which is bigger than all the other countries put together? So the U.S. has to spend way more actual money on their percentage. And, you know, come on, Poland, you got to pony up your 2%. And there have been a lot of folks that said these European countries have not been spending their fair share and not been ponying up enough. So he had some support on that. By the way, I'm one of them. I'm like, no, that was not a bad thing to say when he was president, and he threatened or told a lot of NATO countries, we're not going to do as much if you're not going to do as much. But what he said 2 weeks ago was, yeah, I told all the NATO countries they better spend more money, or I hope Putin comes and attacks them and kills them. And you're like, whoa, come on, dude. What are you talking about? Now, uh, most of us world watchers are like, hey, you do understand, Donald, that you may like Vladimir Putin personally, but he is invading another country in Europe and might be encouraged to attack other countries in Europe if you are suggesting to him that he should. That's how you get into a world war. And even if you're President Donald Trump, if you're president again, and you're just saying you're not going to help those countries, then that means you're pulling out of NATO altogether. And you're like, okay. But Donald, you do realize that every war the U.S. has fought, including in Afghanistan and Iraq, that there were other NATO countries helping us do that. But maybe you really don't know that. So it's not as one-sided and simplistic as Donald Trump makes it out to be in terms of the U.S. does everything and these other countries don't do anything. That is factually not true to begin with. And on top of that, the whole point of NATO is that a united, strong defense is your best offense. No one's ever going to attack a unified NATO. They're too powerful. Each individual country by themselves is not as powerful, but collectively, way powerful. And it just kind of speaks to him not understanding how the greater world works, even in terms of things he is passionate about, like, I don't know, China. So the Trump administration is very worried about China. The current administration is very worried about China. And Donald Trump, if and when he becomes president again, will probably likely focus most of his ire at China. And that's up to him and his administration. That's fine. The U.S. president, they decide policy focus. If you want to focus on China, that's fine. But future President Trump, you do realize that you can scare the shit out of China way more with a unified NATO than you can by yourself. And that's the part that most of us are kind of really struggling with. It is a very powerful military alliance that you want to throw away, but what about the enemies that you actually want to go after? Don't you want some backup on that? That's what we're not quite getting. And again, maybe it's just because Donald Trump just likes to say things that are inflammatory just for funsies. And sometimes what he says has effect. So NATO, in response, has record military spending in Europe this year. So again, a lot of Donald Trump supporters, and I won't call myself a supporter, but I think it is interesting that his rant has produced some results. And, he probably will say, well, that was what I intended to do the whole time. And a lot of his supporters are saying, he's just blustering. He's not going to break up NATO. He's just scaring all these other countries so they'll spend more money. It could be true. Sure. He seems like a long-term planner and a strategic calculator. So sure, that's what he meant to do. But it has worked whether he meant to do it or not. And so a lot of NATO countries in Europe are saying, hey, we actually might not be able to rely on the United States. And we do need to beef up our personal security, our personal defense budgets, because if and when future President Trump comes around, he may not come to help us. And so we, on our own accord, are going to start to unify NATO within Europe even more. And we're all going to make sure that everybody's spending their 2% of their GDP on their military budget. And I think over half of them will meet that mark this year. And the other half are probably going to have a fire lit under their ass to catch up by the year after that. If Donald Trump does abandon NATO, countries like Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are the ones I fear for. Vladimir Putin may take them over the next day if Trump decides to pull the U.S. out of NATO. And what Europe is trying to do right now, I think, is say, hey, Russia, even if Donald Trump is not going to help us, we have enough of a fighting force in Europe. We have way more money than you do, Russia. We might not have as many military people, but we've got as many guns. And by the way, Russia, even if it's just a European NATO with no U.S., we got nuclear bombs too, dude. France and the UK are nuclear powers. So, yeah, they're probably going to unify and strengthen European defenses beyond anyone's imagination because of Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, and in combination with U.S. former President Donald Trump saying he's not going to help NATO countries. So now we're in a new era for even NATO. And again, none of this matters if Biden gets reelected. Because Biden and really probably any other U.S. president ever, I can't even think of another candidate on either side of the aisle who would say they want to pull out of NATO besides that one human. So if anyone on planet Earth besides Donald Trump gets elected as the next U.S. president, NATO is going to be stronger than ever, and the European branch will be stronger in and of its own right, and the United States will continue to be the leader, the quarterback of the greatest winning football defense team ever in the history of planet Earth. So, maybe intended consequences, maybe unintended consequences of Donald Trump's rant is that NATO is bringing strength in one way or the other, either with the U.S. or without the U.S. And that leads to the next story, which many of you have pointed out already today. And the same, for the same reasons I've now been ranting about for 10 minutes, NATO is continuing to expand. This is something else that was totally unpredictable 10 years ago when I made that NATO lecture. Maybe I did reference it at some point that maybe some other European countries would join. 10 years ago, there was no call for it. Even with a resurgent Russia, nobody, even 10 years ago, would have ever thought that Russia would have invaded another country in Europe, would have attempted to try to rebuild the Soviet Union. And again, you have to keep thinking of the double whammy combination here. No one thought that a resurgent Russia would be crazy enough to invade another sovereign state. Simultaneously, no one thought that a right-wing leader of the United States would threaten to pull out of NATO. So it's really all about the combination of these two events. If either of them were happening without the other, it wouldn't be that big a deal. But given they're happening together, we are seeing this galvanization of NATO within Europe and perhaps even other countries around the world that I believe, you heard it here first, I believe you're going to start seeing other countries invited into NATO now to buttress it in case of the United States pulling out of NATO. Again, I still think it's a long shot that even Donald Trump pulls out of NATO, but I mean, he's a reality TV star. He likes making good TV, and it is good TV to destroy kind of an international institution that everybody knows about and that will affect the whole planet Earth. That's good TV, man. We're all just living through this reality show at this point. So back to Europe, they're saying, hey, Finland is already in. They got put in very quickly after Russia's invasion of Ukraine because they share a border with Russia. And they've been at war with Russia in the past, and they won a war against Russia in the past. Go look it up. It's hilarious. The Winter War in Finland. And Sweden was supposed to join at the same time, but other countries held that up. Initially, Turkey held up Sweden's membership bid because I'm trying to think, there's a lot, there's groups in Sweden that have burned the Quran in the past as part of, I don't know if there's anti-immigration sentiment in Sweden, and there's been attacks on Muslims that say, and there was also a couple different Quran burnings at one point. It's a cultural thing in Sweden, much the same in the United States or Brazil or anywhere else, that people who feel threatened, their culture feels threatened, they want to push out the foreigners, push out the immigrants. And so, and Sweden, I think there was, what was it that the Turks were pissed about? I think there was some folks, some like anti-Turkish government folks who had like a political organization in Sweden that Turkey considered a terrorist group. And they're like, Sweden's harboring terrorists, and Sweden has Quran burners there, and Sweden's not doing enough to protect Muslims. And so they were holding up the Swedish bid for NATO based on other things that had nothing to do with NATO. Just politics. Turkey finally got quelled. I can't remember exactly what happened that they finally were appeased. They probably got a ton of money, by the way. And what I mean by that is the Turks have been hosting a lot of refugees from Syria, maybe even some from Gaza at this point, too. During a lot of wars in the Middle East, a lot of folks were trying to migrate to Europe, and a lot of them did. And then the European Union basically started paying Turkey to kind of put a wall up saying, hey, no more migrants can pass through our soil. And so Turkey is currently home to, I don't even know how many hundreds of thousands of refugees. And Turkey gets money from the European Union to help house and feed and clothe those refugees. So I believe that was the playing card Turkey used to, they said, hey, we want more money. If you want Sweden to join NATO, then we're going to get some more money for something else here on the side of this immigration thing. That's my instinct is what happened, and they must have got it. So then Turkey said, sure, Sweden can join. Then it was Austria. Was it Austria or Hungary? Hungary. Hungary is the one. That's right. Let's see. Is it listed in here? Who was the dude? Finland. Hungarian Parliament. Okay, so it was the Hungarians who then started holding up the Swedish bid, partly because their current president, Viktor Orban, is kind of a right-wing guy that kind of maybe thinks Putin's an okay dude, just like Donald Trump thinks Putin's an okay dude. So there's a series of these kind of rightward-leaning, right-wing leaders across the planet. They're like, what's wrong with dictatorship? And so then Hungary then held it up for another 6 months, if not more. But they must have finally gotten beaten down. What they got in return, I don't know. But it's official today. Hungary said, yes, we will allow the Swedes to join NATO. And by the way, for those of you that already watched the NATO lecture, you know that's how it works. It has to be a 100% consensus within NATO ranks for any major decisions, including Article 5. So Article 5, all the countries either have to outright agree to it or at least not protest. So they just all sit around a table and just talk about the issue until everybody's like, okay. That's the way it is with adding new members. Everybody has to say, oh, okay. So it's not like veto power. It's not like each country has veto power, but they kind of do because each country can just say, I'm not convinced yet. I'm not sure. And that's enough to stop any major movement in NATO. Turkey did it first. Hungary did it second. But apparently today they had a NATO meeting and it was like, okay. And so there you go. So NATO is growing, and this is part of the same story I've been talking about for 20 minutes now. Europe slightly, if not more than slightly, worried about an aggressive Russia and an isolationist Trump are stuck in the middle, and they are having to circle the wagons, as the old saying goes. And they indeed are doing that. They're upping their defense spending. They're upping their defense budgets. They are building more security measures within Europe itself, and they're adding new members. So while international organizations at large are starting to take a hit in the world, and NATO may still take the ultimate hit if Donald Trump pulls out of it, but right now they're still growing, okay? And here's what the old NATO map is going to look like soon. And I'm sorry, I've ignored comments even though it's 10 minutes after the hour. Let's see. I left off with a distinct vision about my biggest concern. Distinct vision. So what is your biggest concern about the potential Democrat or Republican candidate for presidency? I think I was just ranting about that. Mostly a much more vigorous and isolationist Donald Trump as president will change the equation of alliances across planet Earth, alliances that many of us feel are kind of holding things in place a little bit, especially when you're talking about a global conflict and war. Okay. I'm sorry. There's so many. I missed a lot of comments. Let me go back up. Conflicted. Secret of happiness. Krukobo says, what's the deal with some states trying to kick Trump off the 2024 ballot? I heard about it, but I don't want to really understand it. They're trying to, some states are just trying to use an insurrectionist law saying if you've ever fought against the United States government, you can't run for office, which is true. They enacted that law after the Civil War. And they said, hey, look, if you were in the Civil War and you basically tried to kill Abraham Lincoln, or kill Robert E. Lee, you can't therefore, since you lost that war, you're forced to being in this government against your will. You can't run for office. That's how that law started. And these sub-states are saying the insurrectionist thing that happened in January is akin to that, and Trump should therefore not be allowed on the ballot. Don't waste any of your precious mental reserves on it, Krukobo. It's not going to happen. The Supreme Court will strike it down. It's unfathomable, but that's going to stand. It's not going to happen. JK says, didn't China build a wall and shut everyone out? Yes, it did, and look where that got them. They were really far behind. Wait till you hear my China lecture, where China in times past has been a very powerful empire, and then the pendulum has swung and their empires crumbled, and they become a very powerful empire and expand, and then they become isolationists and their empire crumbles again. And the last big crumbling of the Chinese empire was 150 years ago, and they became very isolationist, or they had become very isolationist. They were behind the times. They weren't interacting with the world. They're technologically way behind, and they started to basically get taken over by superior powers. China has learned that lesson well. They are not an isolationist country anymore. They tried it, and they've tried it in the past, and it doesn't work for them that well, and they are anything but isolationist in today's world. They're very independent, but they're not isolationist. There's a difference. Okay. Let's see. Distinct Vision, I got that one. Kat back in the house saying, do you think there could be another Capitol riot like what happened on January 6, 2021? Those things are unpredictable, Kat. It's not something that keeps me up at night. Plus, everyone's expecting it now. So if Donald Trump were to lose again, would I expect there to be mass protest? Yeah, but I'm not that smart. Everybody's expecting that. And so police forces across the nation will be adequately prepared for it, and certainly in the Capitol. The Capitol will be on full lockdown pretty much for the whole month of November to probably the next April. So there might be protests, which is your absolute constitutional right to protest. But I can't imagine things getting violent or out of control as they did. That was such a bizarre thing that was incited. It's some things still are truly just unpredictable. That was one of them. But I can't imagine it happening again because we'll be more prepared for it this time. I say we, the police and the Capitol people, be ready for it. Could there be a broader civil war within American society? It could be. That's possible. But the folks who get so passionate about things politically, I mean, where do you go from there? You have an opinion about a presidential election, but once it's done, it's done. And unless you're going to start forming up armies and basically going to try to, if Alabama wants to try to secede from the Union again, if Donald Trump loses, I mean, I guess it's possible, but I just kind of bank on that most people are really lazy. Most Americans are lazy as shit. I mean, you can talk a mean game and you can tweet and you can try to cancel people online and tweet and take pictures and likes and dislikes, but that requires no energy at all. And that's pretty much what people do in today's world. I personally still live in the real world. I go out every day in the real world and do real stuff. So I don't think most people do that. And so to start a new civil war in America requires people to actually get off their asses and do something. And I don't know that there's that many of them that are going to do it. Doing stuff's hard, man. Forming up an Alabama army is hard, and seceding from the government, that's hard, and that's work. And I think most people just like to talk a mean game, but they're not going to work towards actually doing anything that's hard. Managing KFC's back in the hizzle saying, would you say there is a classification of global north and south? Oh, I'm sorry, everybody. It's already 9:14. If you email me right this second, you have 2 minutes, 9:14. You have to 9:16. Just email me. And managing KFC always is now the reminder of it. So it's like the password is global north. Global north. Email me global north right now, and I'll get you 5 points, if not more, for tuning in for tonight's podcast. So managing KFC is asking about a global north and a global south. Those were terms that I think were more applicable even 10 years ago and certainly 50 years ago, managing KFC. And the global north and south really had an economic divide, and I guess a military one too, but it was more economic and semi-political. I think those terms have gotten very fuzzy in today's world, and I look at it more like I know there's a Team West. I know global Team West that you know about from reading my textbook already. That one I can point to. So to me, there's more of a West versus East kind of scenario happening right this second between Team West and, let's say, China and its allies, say China and Russia. That seems to be more pertinent in today's world than the North versus the South. The global North versus the South was much more a product, I believe, of global colonialism, imperialism, where a lot of the European and northern hemisphere countries outright controlled or colonized or reaped the resources off of the South. And some of that still happens, but not nearly as much as it used to. And all those countries are now independent and forming their own alliances all over the place. You know, there's an African Union, and there's Mercosur, and different countries in the global South now interact with each other. Some of them are in the G20. Some of them have formed the BRICS, the BRICS. That one's still pertinent, by the way. So I still believe I liked the concepts of understanding the world through the global North versus the South. I don't think they're as pertinent as they once were, but I could be wrong. That's just my understanding of the modern world. JK says, wow, a rare John Boyer opinion. JK says, I think Poland is an example of a country exceeding the spending target. Yes, Poland is very, very, very worried about Russia, and Poland will continue to lead the charge for a much more unified and stronger European NATO division if the U.S. were to leave. In fact, Poland's fighting for it even if the U.S. doesn't leave NATO. So Poland, right next door to Russia, has fought Russia in the past, has been consumed by Russia at least twice in my memory in the past, does not want to be taken over by Russia again. In fact, Poland might end up being the strongest country in Europe if Germany doesn't get off its ass soon and start doing a lot more. The Germans, because they screwed up during World War II and did that whole Hitler thing, they have been loath, terrified even, into becoming a militarized country again. They were soundly defeated in World War II. They are vilified throughout the entire 20th century for the actions of the Germans during World War II. They feel bad about it. They don't want to become a military society again. But the world changes. And right now, a lot more Europeans are saying, dudes, can you get off your asses, stop apologizing, and get to work rebuilding a real military force? Because if not, we're all going to be speaking Russian soon. So I don't know that that will be enough to encourage Germany to do it, but things seem to be moving in that direction. Germany actually is quite worried about a second Donald Trump presidency as well. So even Germany is starting to say, okay, maybe we better start building more rockets and bombs and getting military stuff happening too. You heard that here first if you haven't heard it already. Krukabo says, thank you for that, JK. You're absolutely right about Poland. Krukabo says, any ideas what other countries might get invited to join NATO if the U.S. pulls out? JK says Japan. JK says South Korea. JK, you are correct. I would add to that list Australia. I would add to that list New Zealand. I would definitely add Japan. That would be the ones that I'm surprised they've not already invited in, since the United States for 10 to 20 years now has seen a rising China as much more significant threat than a rising or re-rising Russia. So the United States has a policy shift towards dealing with China, perhaps even containing China, but certainly being ready for China in the new global face-off between Team West and China. And having said that, think about what partners do you want on your team, on your military outfit. If you're now switching from worrying about great Soviet Union and you're switching up to worry about great China, you want to worry, or you want to have teams that are closer to China on your team. You want to have partners on your team that are closer to China, and that would be South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, if we want to start a war, perhaps even, crazy as it sounds, Vietnam. I know the U.S. had a war with Vietnam. I keep waiting for Vietnam to ask for a military alliance with the United States, because Vietnam is scared shitless of China. for good reason. So you could have the Philippines might turn a corner and want to become a U.S. ally again. It used to be, then they stopped being it. Now they're leaning back towards it. But certainly Australia, New Zealand, all those Pacific Rim countries, those are the ones that would likely be asked to start training with NATO forces or doing something in terms of we're all going to get under an umbrella of alliance in case China attacks Japan or China attacks Vietnam, that we're under this military alliance thing that we all really like. Does that make sense? And by the way, I did a Twitch stream last year on AUKUS, AUKUS, which I hopefully you already watched and you already took a quiz on it. AUKUS is basically a Pacific-based NATO alliance. That's where it's moving to, and it's moving there quite quickly with military defense bases being built in these countries. Japan already has a huge number of U.S. troops. So does South Korea, but for the first time ever, Australia and perhaps even New Zealand are going to be home to U.S. forces and U.S. bases, and being asked to partner up to have underwater submarine bases and stuff. So a lot is going on in that direction too. And you might see some unification of Europe and those countries I just mentioned if the United States doesn't want to be a leader in it anymore. Okay, does that make sense? I'm way over time tonight, but I'm just having such a good time. Replying to JK, Kat says Japan might have to change their constitution before that can happen. Well played, Kat. They will be changing their constitution soon. In fact, I think they already started to. That's been something that's been talked about for a while. Let me get one more story, and then I'll finish this up. As a counter, which demonstrates the rule I'm talking about international organizations starting to perhaps break apart or that pendulum swinging away. NATO's not the only one that's having trouble of perhaps a member wanting to pull out. Yesterday, Armenia stopped participating in what's called CSTO, Collective Security Treaty Organization, that Russia started soon after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Russia has been desperate to form up international organizations, economic ones. They formed up the EU, the European Eurasian Union. I can't remember what the hell Putin calls it. But it's funny that international organizations are starting to perhaps disintegrate because Russia has been desperately trying to become parts of bigger ones. And one of the ones they started, the CSTO, they've now pissed off Armenia, which, and by the way, the CSTO was basically a anti-NATO. It was, hey, here are all the countries that Russia is friends with, and if you attack any of us, then we're collectively going to attack you. And it's like, dude, nobody wants to attack Armenia. So Russia, in the same boat as NATO, with losing one, and it only has a handful of countries in CSTO. So this is kind of a big deal. And this happened because many of the CSTO countries are already been worried, like, dude, we didn't want Russia to invade Ukraine. And now Russia's in a war, which may turn into a bigger global war. And now we're actually going to have to actually fight on Russia's behalf because we're in the CSTO. Dude, I don't want to do that. I'm not trying to get into a fight with the United States because Russia invaded Ukraine. So even his little CSTO group is starting to splinter. And Armenia just yesterday said, we're out. The Russians pissed off Armenia because they didn't come help Armenia in a war it had with Azerbaijan 2 years ago. So Armenia's like, the hell with this. I mean, obviously, we don't have much of a fighting force anyway, but we are out. We're not even going to pretend we're helping you anymore in this CSTO. And that's a big blow to Vladimir Putin, who keeps kind of building up this concept that he's going to reunify the great Soviet Union again. And even allies, even some of his allies like Armenia are like, we don't want to do this anymore. We're out. So I thought that was a interesting couple of stories back to back that, again, prove the point of, there's something going on here in the water with international organizations worldwide. But now that I'm a half hour over, I'll wrap it up. And let's see. JK says, cool, good point. I think you're right. They still have a defense force, if I recall. Here, Sweden will bring an unsinkable aircraft carrier called Gotland, which directly threatens mainland Russia. Whoa, that sounds cool. I've not heard that, JK. Can you email me that story? Enigma Zerg says, do you think NATO will drop Article 10 to allow other countries like South Korea, Japan, or even Colombia to join NATO. Ooh, I had not thought about Colombia. I'm not sure I understand the tie there, Enigma. But you are an enigma after all, Zerg. I will have to check out Article 10, but do I think it's going to happen any second now? No. Do I believe that the AUKUS umbrella might start to do coordinated military exercises with NATO members? Yes. That's how these things start. I think the AUKUS group and a greater Pacific group will start to do collaborative, coordinated military drills and exercises in the Pacific, and to make sure that China and Russia understand the vitality and strength of Team West. The Pacific grouping will then start to coordinate logistics and possibly military drills with other NATO countries, perhaps even other European NATO countries. That's how it will start. I'm not suggesting that Australia is going to jump into NATO tomorrow, but they will definitely, both these groups, one in the North Atlantic, one in the Pacific, will keep growing one way or the other if the U.S. pulls out, and eventually probably start to come together at some point in the future. That's just my take on things. But we are way out of time, so the last chat goes to a first-time chatter, Jack Bruzisi in the house, saying, why aren't countries like Ireland and Austria part of NATO? That is a great question, Jack, and you'll have to ask those countries specifically. However, Ireland was always kind of neutral. I believe Ireland was at one point neutral during World War II and maybe throughout all of it. And Austria, of course, home of the Nazi Party, that they had their own birthplace of Adolf Hitler. They had their own historical baggage as well from World War II. And both countries, again, no one's forcing them to join NATO, and maybe they weren't even asked, but they probably were asked. And both countries internally just decided it's not in our best interest. In the case of Ireland, that one is a little weirder to me. But in the case of Ireland, they were just like, well, we're far away from the Soviet Union. We were kind of neutral during World War II. We don't really have any enemies. We're not that interested. We don't want to have to spend 2% of our GDP on military stuff. We have other fish to fry. And when NATO was formed up, by the way, and actually for most of the 20th century, Ireland was really poor. In the 80s, Ireland was really poor, and they weren't doing that well after World War II either. So it was partly an economic, partly just a strategic planning thing that they're like, it's not in our best interest. And by the way, this is what Donald Trump would say, they're freeloaders. Ireland knows that Russia's not going to attack them because we probably will come help them even if they weren't NATO members. Austria may be thinking the same way. It's like, why would we join a group that we're surrounded by NATO countries? How would you even attack us? How would Russia or China attack us? They would have to go through NATO countries to get to us, and so we don't need to pay. We're already safe. So there's a little bit of that as well. But this has been an absolutely awesome, I would say, office hour, but it's been the office hour and a half hour. And I've covered a lot of fun ground. These are issues that I'll be talking about perhaps in more succinct detail when I do the 2024 International Organizations Update. But even that's only a few of the things that I'm going to talk about. A lot of the trade blocks are starting to disintegrate in ugly ways too, and I'll chat about those as well. But as always, thank you all so much for hanging out, and I'm really sorry I didn't, for those of you that already left, I'm sorry I didn't remember to give you some extra credit in the first hour. Didn't even remember it until the minute 75. Remind me next week to make sure I get you some extra credit earlier. But thank you all for tuning in. Hope you learned some good stuff tonight, that you understand the world a little bit better. And of course, I'll get you some extra credit if you had already emailed me. And you all have a great Monday night, a fantastic week. And wait a minute, isn't next week spring break? If I don't see you before then, have a great spring break. I might still be podcasting. I'm sorry. Twitch streaming next Monday, even though you're spring breaking, if you all want it. So have a great one, you all. Crank out all the work this week. Enjoy your spring break, and we'll see you next Monday. Same plaid time, same plaid Twitch channel. If not, we'll see you 2 weeks from then. Have a great break, and as always, a party on.